little pieces of it to prejudice a jury or prejudice the public, but you play all of it, or at least enough of it, to provide full context. I was denied full context in those impeachment hearings. I was certainly denied full context at that second trial, which was a travesty of justice. And that very prosecutor that you referenced actually lied to the jury right there and told them, go back to the jury room and hear how many tapes you hear to corroborate his testimony, when he knew those tapes existed, but those tapes were not allowed to be played before the jury, and so he prejudices me that way as well. Now, I expected a much better result from the courts than I got. That's a disillusioning experience I've gone through. I'm not here to try to relitigate that. I am, however, here to try to look to the future and to give the people of Illinois and the people across America a better sense of how their elected officials, whether you like them or not, have a right to be treated with constitutional rights, due process, because they're the elected representatives of the people. And we have a problem in American politics today. It's a growing problem that's going to destroy our democracy. And it's this. It's this whole idea of using prosecution and impeachment for political purposes, weaponizing the impeachment process, weaponizing the prosecutions of the leading political figures. What they did to me at the AAA level to a Democratic governor, like him or not, they tried to do at the major league level to a Republican president, criminalizing things that aren't crimes. They got away with it with me. They didn't get away with it with him. But this is bad for our democracy. It shouldn't be about Republicans or Democrats. This is an American issue. It's about the right of the people to self-government, our right to choose our own leaders through free, fair, and honest elections, and not have our choices taken from us by rotten, unconstitutional impeachments and dishonest prosecutions.
Governor, you said that you may or may not run for public office again, but do you want to? And if so, what office? Further, what makes you think that voters in Chicago or Illinois want you?
I haven't thought that far ahead. I can just tell you, as I just said moments ago, I have no plans to run for any particular office. The idea of doing all that again is really is a kind of an unhappy thought in many ways, because it's a hard business and it's hard on your family, and what happened to my family has been very difficult. So it's not that I have any specific plans. However, I'm not going to rule out any options either. I feel like I was a great governor for the people. I did things for people, like all kids, providing health care to all of our children, free public transportation for our senior citizens and for the disabled. No state in America has ever done that. Re-importing prescription drugs for our senior citizens from Canada so they can afford to pay for those medicines. And by the way, that was one of the bases the House used and the Senate used to throw me out of office. They also used another basis, which was flu shots. I went out because the legislature wouldn't provide the money. We had some money. We went and got flu shots, vaccines, in anticipation of a possible epidemic back then on a flu that the experts were telling us were going to be bad. They impeached me for that and removed me from office for that. They proved up no crimes. They had no impeachable offenses. It's an unconstitutional impeachment that violated the due process rights of an elected governor, a duly elected governor, and the due process rights of the people of Illinois who elected that governor.
Governor, do you take accountability for anything? Do you think there should have been any consequences
for
your
what?
behavior?
My behavior was lawful and legal, and I would frankly deserve condemnation if I gave in to what they tried to make me do, if I gave in to that corrupt prosecution, if I agreed to say the things they wanted me to say, if, in other words, I did just about what everybody else did when they put that pressure on it. But I wouldn't do it. I paid a heavy price because I wouldn't do it. It's the only explanation for why they threw me in prison for 14 years, because I wouldn't play ball, because what they were doing was corrupt and unconstitutional and unlawful. I followed the law. They used an unlawful standard that was expressly ruled not constitutional by the United States Supreme Court in the seminal case McCormick versus the United States, in order to prove bribery and campaign contribution cases, because that's all this was, campaign contributions. Their big lie about the sale of a Senate seat was reversed by the appellate court. They agreed and vindicated me by saying that was routine political log rolling. They upheld those fundraising allegations without using the standard that's required, and that is an express quid pro quo. Senator Menendez got the benefit of a judge that followed the law, and they threw his case out for insufficient evidence. I should have been treated the same way. There was no quid pro quo. We knew where the lines were. They never proved a quid pro quo. They never even said that there was a quid pro quo. And if you look at the court record, you'll see the judge specifically said, I don't even want to hear anybody mention the phrase quid pro quo. It was a corrupt prosecution. I was railroaded. The people got cheated. And I'm back, not necessarily to run again, but to be on the side of the people, to do what I can to serve them in a good way as I rebuild my life and hopefully build a better life for my daughters and for my wife.
Did you try to get an attorney for today?
What's the purpose?
I'll get to you. I'm sorry?
Did you want an attorney today? Did you try to get somebody to represent you, or did you want to do it pro se?
No, I wanted to do it pro se. I feel like I should be the one who... I remember what my mother used to teach me when I was a little boy. She used to tell me when I get in this, there'd be an issue on the schoolyard, some bigger kid was pushing me around, and I'd come home and I'd tell her, you know, this kid Tony, I remember vividly, he was 2 grades ahead of me, he was pushing me around the schoolyard. And I complained to my mother about it. She said, well, son, what do you come to me for? Fight your own battles. I think I should fight my own battles, so therefore I'm filing this pro se. I'm no longer a lawyer. They're not allowing me to be a lawyer. When I was a lawyer, I never did anything along these lines. I'm not claiming to be a constitutional scholar, I'll confess, that I got a C in constitutional law. But I think I got most of the constitutional questions right the second time on the bar exam, when I passed it that time after flunking it the first time. But I feel very good about where I'm at on my interpretation of the law and the constitutional rights of the voters. And I think this is a timely issue because it goes to the right to vote. And it goes to the decisions that ought to be for the people, not for prosecutors or for a whole bunch of politicians in state government who are out to get a governor who was fighting them because I contend that they were part of a rotten political system that they were getting rich
I
from.
know people want to know what you're doing. They're going to stop me on the street and say, what you doing these days?
Well, I have witnesses. I actually, a week ago, the Sunday before last Sunday, I actually ran somewhere between 18 to 20 miles. So I'm not necessarily running for office, but I am running. Slower than I used to, but I'm still doing it, and I'm actually running a lot of miles. So I'm doing that, but that doesn't pay the bills or, you know, feed my children. I do this thing called cameos, where you get hired to send out messages. So hypothetically, let's say a loved one of Phil Rogers were to tell me that, well, my brother or my cousin Phil Rogers is having a birthday, would you please send him a shout out and wish him a happy birthday? I do that, and surprisingly, it's been shockingly lucrative to be able to do that. And you can do it from your home, and it was particularly timely when COVID hit and everybody was sheltering in place. I do consulting work for a logistics company. I've given some paid speeches where I've been paid to, you know, tell my story or talk about some other issues. I'm working on what I hope will be a book, which is something that sometimes I work on more often than other times, and some other times I put it down and don't get to it for a while. I have a podcast called the Lightning Round Podcast. So I'm pretty busy, and I'm blessed.
Are you happy that Judge Sega won't be able to hear this lawsuit?
I'll be right with you. I'll ask you that. Go ahead, Mike.
When do you hope the book is going to be published? Will it be self-published, or do you have...
No. We're discussing possibilities with possible publishers. There's the possibility of before the Christmas holidays, but I don't want to promise that. Nothing's... Yeah, but please don't run with that because I don't have an agreement. I wrote a book before, by the way, and I had to contract it. They give you 3 months to write it, so I'm going to do it again, but I don't know exactly when I'll do it. There was something else I wanted to tell you that I was doing. I forgot about that, Mike. It'll probably come to me.
Can you not profit from that?
What's that?
For another Illinois law passed following your whole saga, couldn't you not profit from any proceedings?
They try to seize the profits. I think they might
Yeah, I
take
think
the
that's
money.
a law already.
I don't think so. I know that George Ryan wrote a book, and I know that
Yeah, it was
several
passed in
others.
your wake.
What's that?
It was passed in your wake. You might have been otherwise occupied,
Oh.
but I believe that it's...
Oh, yeah, where was I?
So no, that's not something that your attorney...
I'm not worried about that. I think that's unconstitutional if they have something like that. Probably is unconstitutional. May very well have been ruled unconstitutional by a federal court somewhere, maybe here, maybe somewhere else. I mean, they do unconstitutional things in Springfield while they're making themselves rich down there. Let me say a couple of things real quick. In spite of everything, let me just say this. I don't hate anybody. I've been given a new beginning. I consider myself very lucky for the new beginning that I've been given. I'm grateful for all the good things that I have in my life. I'm thankful to President Trump for what he's done for me. I'm overjoyed to be home and reunited with my daughters and my wife. I'm optimistic about the future. And I know that it was through the grace of God that he brought me home. So I have really nothing but good feelings, even though it's a little painful to come back here and relive some of this.
Governor, I want to make sure. You cite a lot of examples of political wrongs. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're not interested in the Cook County Board of Review. So, are you interested in running for governor?
I'm not here to talk about what are. Sorry about the bus. I don't want to speculate about what I may or may not run for. As of right now, I'm not allowed to run for that, and as a result, no plans to run for that. Let's see where this lawsuit goes. Let's see whether or not I get the opportunity, the right back to be able to run for an office like that, and I'll let you know.
Well, you were elected by a pretty big plurality before all this happened, and reflect on what you were asking. Do you think you could be elected governor of Illinois again?
I'm not going to say anything along those lines. I have no idea about how I do in any kind of election. Again, this is a lot less about that than it is about just me trying to get back some of the things that were taken from me. This is one thing I'd like to get back. Eventually, I'd like to get my law license back, and eventually, I'd like to get my reputation back. You know, I was thinking the other day. Well, I was thinking earlier this morning, actually. Perish the thought, but if I were to fall dead right here, my obituary in tomorrow's papers wouldn't be that good. I don't like what they'd be writing in my obituary, so I got a lot of work to do to make sure that hopefully I'll live a lot longer and I can do things in my life and with my life where that obituary can be corrected. I had a lot of unhappy experiences when I was gone sheltering in place in prison, and among them was being in thank you. Among them was being in the prison library, leafing through an almanac, because I had a discussion with one of my colleagues there, a drug dealer from Corpus Christi, Texas, and we were talking about the number of gold records Elvis sold, and so there was a dispute. I was on the high side, he was on the low side, so to resolve the dispute, we went to the law library, the library for the inmates, and we found an almanac, 2013, and we're leafing through that almanac. We get to the world records. Elvis sold more world records, gold records than anybody else, and he's in there as number one, and I was able to prove my point to my colleague. And then accidentally, as I'm leafing through the pages, I get to do a double take. I see a photograph of me in there, and it was a relatively big photo. I'm in the almanac for this, and it sucks. I don't want to be in the almanac for this. Then I leafed through and found that I was in there, mentioned 4 different times, and the only one that wasn't negative was the one where they say I'm a notable person. The other 3 were very negative and very dispiriting. And so part of what I'm doing is to clean all of that up. And I feel like I have a lot of time in my hands. I consider myself fortunate, fired up, fit as a fiddle, full of faith, and finally free.
Have you talked to President Trump, former President Trump?
No.
And will you be with him in 2024?
I'm a Trumpocrat.
So if he runs in 2024,
I'm a Trumpocrat.
You're backing him?
I'm a Trumpocrat. I don't see how you can't vote for the guy who pulled you out of the freezing waters of the North Atlantic, and you're treading water frantically, and you don't want to go underneath in those dark, deep, cold waters, and he gets you out of it. I don't see how you can do anything but be supportive of somebody who did that for you. It's a lifesaver, and I'm grateful to him forever. I'm sorry? No, not mine. No, they're not my video crew.
What's the video for?
We should ask them. Yeah. You got a question about Judge Zagel, I think?
I was
Yeah.
joking.
Oh.
Judge Zagel comes out and out of retirement, here's your lawsuit.
Then I think my chances have gone down significantly.
We've talked to some legal experts who say that this will likely be thrown out as a frivolous lawsuit. If you're trying to get your law license back and be on the right side of history, what do you say to those who say this is frivolous?
They don't know anything about what happened in Springfield. If you would ask those same people, well, he alleges that the General Assembly used a process and rules that violated due process and constitutional rights of not only the governor but voters, and you identified specific evidence showing that, I think they'd probably have a different view. Because don't forget, this is the fruit of a rigged impeachment process. That's what I'm contending, and I know I'm right. And if I'm given a hearing if I'm giving a hearing and given a chance to prove that evidence up, then I think people will see it for what it is. And there is a doctrine in the law that's well respected, and the Supreme Court ruled it. It's called the fruit of a poisonous tree. And if you can show that something happened because the seed that was planted was poisonous and the fruit then was contaminated, you can reverse something that's wrong. And so that's what I'm basing this on. And those so-called experts don't know the facts. Nobody knows these facts as well as I do. I live them. Let me say another thing real quick, which might be interesting. I hope to call Madigan and Tim Mapes as witnesses. I hope to bring them down to, if I'm given a chance to have a hearing, and put them under oath here and ask them what their involvement was with the FBI before I was arrested, what their involvement was with the FBI after I was arrested, what their involvement was with the FBI when they put together and implemented those impeachment rules and denied me the opportunity to call relevant witnesses, to confront relevant witnesses against me, and to present evidence like exculpatory evidence like those tapes that the FBI made that would have, I think, dramatically changed the outcome of the impeachment. I want to call Madigan and Tim Mapes to testify under oath and ask them what their role was.
Has Speaker Madigan been treated unfairly?
I don't know much about what's happening to him other than what I've read in the papers.
Given that, in your experience, you don't have an opinion and knowing him?
I can tell you what I think about Madigan as a Speaker of the House and a public servant. He's a longtime political boss. He was all about his power position in Springfield. It was all a power game for him. It was all about politics. He's a hard-working guy. He's smart. He's clever. He's cagey. He's sneaky. He's a backstabber. He's ruthless, relentless, remorseless. In other words, he's got all the skills you need to be good at politics and government. The problem with Madigan, he never directed that for larger purposes, for good purposes, or for purposes to serve the people. It was all about him, all about his position in the power game, and all about him and his minions and cronies getting rich down there. And they all did. And they did it on the backs of the people. That's why Illinois is the highest tax state in the nation. Taxpayers in Illinois pay taxes at a rate that's 39.9% higher than the national average. And it's why consumers get screwed here in Illinois when they don't have to. So, do I think Madigan should be the Speaker, or should have been the Speaker, or squandered his opportunity as the Speaker with all of his talents and skills to do good things for people? He could have done a lot of good things. He failed because it was all about politics, power, and money for him and for the people around him.
But let's be honest, streaming service, what these guys are shooting is...
You have to ask them.
You've obviously got help, Mike.
Yeah.
You know what they're doing.
I'm participating in it, but they're the ones who handle the details of it.
It's beyond a cable TV thing or some sort of service like that.
All I know is what they've told me, what they've indicated. You should ask them. I don't think it's fair for me to... I mean, they're here. You can ask them.
Why did you bring up Roland Burris in the filing? What does that have to do with...
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That was part of it, too, you know. Before in their rush to judgment, they were really determined to get me out of office quick because they didn't want me to pick a senator. And they sent emissaries to me to make a deal. And the deal was, if I step out and resign temporarily, they had found a law that shows the incapacity of a governor. And the law was that if a governor is physically unable to do his or her job as governor, that he or she could temporarily step aside. The lieutenant governor assumes the duties temporarily, and then when that governor who is elected by the people gets his or her health back, then he or she can become the governor again. And so what they did was they suggested to me that they would take that law and apply that to my circumstances because I was in a unhealthy political situation after a super sensational arrest of a sitting governor that's unprecedented at 6 o'clock in the morning with SWAT teams around his house and a hostage negotiator, all designed to break my will to resist and make me give in to what they wanted me to say, which I would never do. And so they were testing me, and during that period, immediately after the arrest, to step aside and not pick a senator. And when I told them that I wasn't stepping aside, I did nothing wrong, and I wasn't going to resign, and I rejected their offer, which incidentally came along with being paid my salary as governor and the promise of keeping my security detail, which would have made me a ghost payroller governor, which I rejected. When I turned that down, I said, I have a job to do. I'm going to be the governor. You shouldn't impeach me. You got to wait until I get a fair chance to prove my innocence. Or, frankly, I don't even have to do that. They should prove my guilt. Wait for that. But they wouldn't do it, and so a lot of the motivation, I think, to rush the impeachment was to keep me from picking a senator. There was a lot of maneuvering back then from a lot of different people who wanted to be a United States senator. I did my duty, my constitutional duty, I appointed Roland Burris to the United States Senate. I'm the first governor in American history to appoint a black person to the United States Senate. I'm proud of that, and I'm glad you mentioned that so I could say that here. Okay, now I got to figure out where I get my checkbook to pay for the filing fee, because we can't find that checkbook. Do they take credit cards?
Seeking a declaratory judgment.
An injunction and a declaratory judgment.
So you're going to go upstairs and file the documents.
Yes, I believe the 20th floor, right? Is it the 20th floor, Mike?
I think you can just email it.
No, you can't. You have to. We looked into that. You have to be part of an emailing process, and I'm not. So,
Because you're doing
Yeah.
it pro se, right?
correct. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Release the prisoner.
Thank you. I'm used to that. See you guys.
Thank you, Governor.